Matar and Michael R Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
Only thing you say.
This will be the only thing I say this episode. So bask in the introduction of the Dripping Bucket Podcast. Welcome back with your hosts, Krystle Matar and the guy who quit drinking coffee and is just fucking angry about everything. And today we are joined by JD Evans and Andy Peloquin, and we are going to talk about romance again. Oh my God, icky emotion. All right, fuck it, I'm out.
You know, you brought this on yourself by telling me you were writing that tragic romance project, and now it's like, yes, I can fix him. He is so close. He's ready for me. And so in between episodes, I casually tossed a compliment Andy's way, saying that I have perfect faith that he's going to pull this off when he's ready to dive in. And he tried to tell me that he wasn't going to. And then he was about to launch into like schooling me on something, and I'm waiting in suspense now for the schooling.
I was actually just going to go on a tirade about how my brain does not work that way. So I'm like all authors, I'm hypercritical of my own work, and writing the amount that I do every week, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm very, very good at, and this is what I'm very, very much not good at. And all the things that I'm not good at are all the things that I've been noticing in the romances that I've been reading, that everything is so like textural and thematic, and it's, sensory, and I'm good at some of this stuff, but like I don't have the skill set for that. I could probably develop it, but it would take so much time and effort to develop that I'm like, I don't even know.
I think
effort
you're
is
closer. I think you're closer to it than you give yourself credit for, though. Because like I'm just thinking that that short story that I read that you did, that one specifically was a masterclass in understated tension. And tenderness, especially revolving around parenthood. And I don't think, and then also horrific violence. And the balance,
which is kind of the Andy Peloquin
and I
sweet
actually
spot.
don't think, I don't actually think you're all that far from romance. Having seen kind of the beautiful soft tenderness that you can evoke from that character's position as a mother, it's actually not going to be a big journey to pivot that into a romantic kind of tension.
But
I really truly think you're closer to it than you think you are. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so that is one poignant scene or two small scenes between the characters, where it's almost like everything is full intensity in every single one of those scenes. Whereas with romance, something that is done so well and so difficult is that there's so much happening and yet not. There's always like this push and pull that I'm very much 100% all the time. So I can do it in bits and pieces here and there. But when it comes to writing those moments where it's like the character wants to do everything, but then they can't for some reason, and then just like for me, it's like if it's going to go and stop, fine, but not go and stop, go and stop, go and stop, go and stop so many times in the same scene, which definitely builds up this tension. But that's just like a whole new layer of things that I'm like, I can do this in a battle, but even then, if you read my big battle scenes, it's only so many times, whereas like Mages of the Wheel, it's like 100 times in the same scene. I'm like, this is gonna kill me. I don't have that kind of brain that goes back and forth like that.
I mean, you could make that the character's problem too. I would argue. Like you could give your character the kind of brain that is on and only on, and then let the poor fucker try to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had advice for you for how to turn it on and off like that.
You
I
know
don't know.
what I
It
mean?
to
I
me,
think-
it like
I think-
seems
I think it can be done.
it's habitual at this point. You just get, just like when you're writing anything, you kind of get an instinct for, this needs to pivot or whatever here. And I am actually on the low end of the spice meter. I didn't think I was. Apparently I'm a prude. And I'm on the low end of the spice rating in most fantasy romance circles. And so the reason that you get those stops and starts, Andy, is because I don't want to write 10 sex scenes. I want to write between 1 and 3, right? So you keep that, you build it up a little bit, it's a little bit like imagining like a switchback trail, right? You get to 1 and then you get to catch your breath and then you go catch your breath and then you go to the other one and catch your breath. And that's kind of what it's like, So I don't know. It's also, you also have to kind of do that when you're trying to intermarry a big fantasy plot and a romance plot. There's got to be stops and starts, otherwise all they're ever going to do is hump each other, and then nothing happens, and they get taken over by the big bad guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which can be fun, because some characters that is genuinely all they want to do, and you just keep throwing shit in their way, and they go a little bit off the deep end. Oh, Laszlo.
Okay, let me ask.
Recently learned that spicy means sexy in fantasy.
Oh yeah,
because
that's a censor.
looking at our fantasy over on Reddit, I thought it was a lot of people talking about Dune.
Dune was a 5 chili experience.
Must have been a rude awakening.
Oh my lord,
God,
that's really
people
funny.
are talking about sex.
Well, it's so interesting. I am fascinated by the fact that, like, the differences between our fantasy and our fantasy romance. Like, we have so many people that come over to the our fantasy romance. They're like, "Oh, the fantasy guys kicked me out because I asked for a romance plot line." They're like, "Go over to fantasy romance. We don't want you here." And it's really interesting because I feel like there's the kind of aversion to just a whole romance, whether it has sex or not.
The perfect
And then
spot
there's
to
like
lose
within
the
the fantasy
internet.
romance, there's this spectrum.
Yeah.
I lost you guys again. Oh my gosh.
I didn't even
I
know
was
there
about to
was
say
an our
something.
fantasy romance. I'll have to take
Me
a look
neither.
at that.
Oh, good
So,
luck.
our
I mean, I'm
fantasy
guessing-
people are like, "Ooh, I'm looking for a spicy fantasy book."
I have
And
an
I'm like,
internet
have you
connection,
tried
you
Dune?
stupid asshole.
What?
Yeah. Well, so here's a question that I wanted to ask Krystle, and
Andy, you were
for
about to
Jen.
say something. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. How much is planned beforehand in your specific approach to writing, and how much is very much instinctual, habitual, kind of instinct spur of the moment? Of those scenes specifically, not the story overall, but
Okay.
just those character moments.
Do you mean literally just the sex scenes, or do you mean like the romance between?
The emotional
Stella?
stakes and progression and all of that. Like because we're assuming that this is a well written romance, that the sex is tied up well with the emotionality.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, actually, none of it was planned in Brightwash because I thought I had to choose one or the other. When I decided, I put my publishing pants on. I'm like, I'm gonna make this book into something that will be published come hell or high water. And so now I'm gonna have to choose: do I want to write sex books, or do I want to write or do I want to write fantasy? And I just assumed that I had to make a choice. And so I chose fantasy because it was just such it was a genre that welcomed me home in a time where I was really struggling. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do that one. And as I was working on Brightwash, without romance in it, the story is so bleak and so dark and so depressing that there came a point where I kind of dreaded working on it, because it's like I'm actually feeling okay today. I don't want to engage with those emotions right now. And so that was when I was like, oh, okay, I need to change something, because this was the project the hill I was gonna die on. I gotta fix it. I gotta finish it. And so I revised it to add the romance between Tasha and Stella, and suddenly it balanced. It just pulled everything back into equilibrium. And so at first there wasn't very much of those scenes, because it was like, oh shit, where can they I don't know. And then somebody, an early editor, commented that I was really good at writing sexual and emotional tension, and it really helped carry the story. And I was like, oh, I'll add more. And so about half of the scenes that are there, I added immediately before the last copy edit, because it was like, oh, this is working, okay, more is the answer. And then when it came time to write Brick and Bone, I went off in the other direction, where I was like, way too much sex, sorry Fletcher, and I kind of lost the fantasy story. So then I had to go back and kind of do the opposite of like, okay, well, this isn't what I wanted either, so I'm gonna have to cut like a lot of this and, remember what kind of fantasy story I was writing, and then balance it back out again. And then again, as soon as I hit the right weight on either of them, it just hit equilibrium and it worked as a story. So everything I'm doing well is entirely an accident.
But so when you were
Yeah.
going to write in those scenes, how much did you plan ahead of time about each of those scenes?
Good question. Probably not much. It like that would have been like, so for example, one of the ones that I added really late was, I think, the second chapter. Joshua encounters Stella sitting on the front stoop of her building, and they're just standing next to each other, and he checks his watch. And it's like, it was a huge moment, like a lot of people remark on it, and it was last minute. And the only reason it was there was because I realized that my romantic leads didn't meet each other until nearly 100 pages into the book, and I was like, that doesn't work. And so I just needed something. Like I need to give them something, and that was the scene, and then I was moving on to the next editing pass. So no, I don't plan.
I'm gonna say, Andy, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say 50-50 at this point. Like I know what's gonna happen kind of at any given moment overall, but then the story, weaves and flows and all of that. So I'm like, there's a lot of organic stuff happening. But this was my question, especially like reading Mages of the Wheel, how intricate all of those character moments felt, how thematically consistent everything was, even to like the word choices. Like I messaged you saying Ivy at like the 20% mark. As soon as I got that it was an arranged marriage, I was like, oh, this is perfect. The like it's gonna grow like a freaking ivy plant, and their love is gonna grow on each other. And I was like, you see these things in word choices. So my question was, how much of this is planned out beforehand, and how much of this is just like the spur of the moment accidental brain cloud that you get when you sit down and write?
So for me personally, in this particular series, since each book focuses around, you know, one of these houses of magic, when I'm describing a scene through their viewpoint, I want their thoughts and magic to be the same, you know, like, I want the magic to be intrinsic to who they are, and they just think of things that way. So when Nesrin is thinking about something or is feeling something, I'm going to use that creation language to describe it. So she was often feeling like a vine of fear or things like that, right? And it was the same with with Isol and Amara, and they with water and air, and then Naimi, who has this incredible intellect, is just like cold and wind, and that was planned. The intimate moments, if you think about it, you know, just by craft, they are foreshadowing for something that isn't a secret, right? Like the tension of a secret comes from the foreshadowing. You know something's coming, right? Because there's good foreshadowing. And romance is like that. You just don't know how that secret's going to happen or when. And so that's what those scenes are. So you don't need that many off and ons. You just need, you can't just, that's the other problem when people read romance that maybe wasn't written that well, is if you just throw two people in a room and they have sex, there's no emotion, there's no build up, there's no tension. It's not fun. It's just kind of like, this is, you know, okay. You know what I mean? And
that happened. I just
all right. It's like that random shot in a movie where you see somebody's naked ass and you're like, oh, okay. But yeah, but that is also my style. And I would say that in a lot of fantasy romance, the language isn't that thematic. It isn't.
No.
And that is neither positive nor negative. It is just that you can come to it with your own style and not be worried that it's not going to be accepted. You know, like, just, you were talking about Rachel earlier. Rachel and I have incredibly different writing styles, but we both have a pretty loyal fan base because that's what they wanted. And I'm sure it would be the same if, you know, you guys wanted to write your gory, grimdark mystery romance books.
Yeah, sorry, grimdark romance has already been taken.
Future and yeah, it's true. It's true.
That's mine.
You just have to comp to Krystle.
Yeah.
So, spicy scenes. So, you're writing fantasy. At some point, there's going to be probably a magical battle. And every time, every book, you got to do something new. Your magical battle has to be different. You've got to sort of stop and go like, how do I write a crazy wizards versus demons battle that no one's ever seen before?
In a genre that relies almost exclusively on wizards versus demons,
Yeah. So with sex scenes, you mean, how do you do that?
One different, Yeah,
no, that's definitely something I should have thought of before I thought I was going to write a 6-book series. Yeah, when you get to book 5 and you're like, what the fuck am I going to do? Okay, so
that's when the heroine is a sleeper BDSM agent that nobody saw coming, and
right. You know, there's a few different things you can do, because I think one of the things that we forget is that intimacy doesn't always have to be sex.
Good,
right?
Yeah, that too.
So there was a scene I did in Siren and Silent that I really liked, and it was actually, she was washing his hair.
Oh, I love that.
And so, I think, I mean, and there was tension there, right? For a number of reasons, but like, it was still very sensual, but it wasn't, you know, outright sex. And I think that,
I think it was more intimate than sensual.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a whole lot of sex to it, but the physical touch, the closeness, the intimacy, it conveyed the same emotion that, say, Isol and Bashir, the way that she was super playful and sexual with him. It was the exact same intimacy, just such different characters that it felt different, but it was the exact same impact.
And yeah, and I think that's kind of what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be a sex scene. It doesn't always have to end in bumping uglies, right? So it can be something else. And that's, you have a whole like artist's palette of ways to do intimacy that can be just as emotionally impactful as tying someone to a headboard, if you will. Which I've never written, but there's a lot of that in fantasy.
Upcoming.
A lot.
Well, there you have it, folks. Writing a sorceress battle is exactly like writing a sex scene.
Very much. In fact, if you're me, the magic happens at the same time. I'm saying there's a lot of fireworks, and it works really well.
I think to Andy's point too, a lot of that separation comes from the individual story, the individual characters, and also to Jen's point, the individual world building, where like what am I trying to, where each character brings something different to it in the same way that you would in a battle. Like if you're doing a big battle and you've got a cavalry unit and that's your focus, that's going to be a completely different battle scene than if you've got, archers or, pikemen or, any of the various fantasy accoutrements. And when it comes to intimacy, the characters will inform the flavor of the intimacy, like Andy was saying about your books, Jen, where some of the intimacy is really chaste and tender, and some of the intimacy is more overt and sexual and playful. And it just, the changes that you could potentially track in a character in an ongoing series could be really impactful. Like Toshwi in Brightwash is not going to be the same guy as Toshwi in Ash and Stone. Like he's been through some shit. He's fucking tired. He's mad. And also now, that's kind of a spoiler. Whatever. By the third book, he's a lot different, and magic is going to be important, and that's going to change. That's going to change his intimacy with people. I don't even know what's to.
And I think to like get it granular, you can change. You can go surface level with, okay, last time we did missionary, and this time we're going to do something else. You can change the room layout or the location, inside, outside, like, you can change the emotions going into the scene. And you just, when you're thinking about what you want to get out of it, I mean, we all know what everybody wants to get out of it, but at the same time, emotionally, what you might want to get out of it, like, and how that character would approach the scene. So, my first character was very intellectual, so she was thinking a lot. And my second one, like Andy was saying, she was a lot more like sassy and kind of in your face, and so that was a raunchy for me book. It was a more sexual book. The third one was a very sensual character, and so her stuff was a little slower and a little more gentle. And then in my other books, I had like a dude that was a virgin, and I had the last one actually didn't have a lot of sex in it at all, which I think my fans were like, "What's this? What is bullshit?" That one was more about, to me, it didn't fit because that one was more about two people that had a lot of work to come together, and so I felt if I went too early with the sex, it would have felt very weird, to me. I think about it. To me, coming at sex from a more mature standpoint, these things are different than, say, if I were 20 and writing a romance. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so that impacts it too. Like, how old are your characters, and what are they bringing into that experience as well? I know that that's kind of a really broad answer for a specific question, but sometimes I don't know until I get to it, and sometimes I just start out with, well, I've never done a table before, so we'll just try it here and see what happens.
That goals. Yeah, we're gonna get a table. We'll have our paired table scenes in our individual books. But I think that is, you said it's a vague answer, but it's not, because it would be the same answer for a battle scene, because it's like, you have your infantry child who's going into it for the first time, and they got no clue, and it's terrifying. And then you've got your grizzled dress character who's like, yeah, let's go. All right, hurry up! I got other shit to do. Exactly. And so it's the same character beats. It's just a different.
I would agree. I mean, that's what I tell people that ask that basic question, which you guys don't need this, but how do you write a sex scene? You write it the same way you would write any other scene. And if you just need to be like, sex scene here, which I have absolutely done, and then come back later to put on the window dressing, there is nothing wrong with that.
Oh man, I am the opposite. I will churn those fuckers out and then try to find a reason to keep them, and it didn't work for me on Brick and Bone.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh, I don't know. I mean, Andy, are you really wanting to write like actual romance? Or are you just wanting to put more of a strong romance subplot into your books? Like, are you writing a romance plot, or are you writing fantasy with romantic subplot?
All of my series have romance in it. Like, romance is so organic to who I am as a person. And the foundations of healthy relationships are so critical to my characters and all of that. But I'm like, I would like to write a romantasy that walks the line between an amazing, dark, violent, whatever, epic fantasy story and a great romance. Something that it's just one more challenge for me to tackle, and I think it's something that I would enjoy because I enjoy it's a very addicting pacing that I would really like to write. And I think the emotional growth, or the growth that I would have creatively experience, like walking the characters through their emotional growth, I think would translate really well into everything else that I write. As an example, the scene that I wrote yesterday afternoon after reading Ice and Ivy, there's this moment where the character, he just holds out a hand to the person who he's basically been about to kill, and he just helps her up. And there's nothing else said. And before, I would have done something a little bit more, we're going to say, rookie, right? I would have been like, let's go, it would have been a more physical or a more verbal thing, but just that simple gesture. Like, for me, having seen it work through all of the books that I've been reading in romantasy, just the way that they kind of, they dial things back a lot in terms of dialogue. They make things more tactile, more physical. And that, I think I've seen my writing improve by reading that. So I think going through the whole process of writing a romantasy, especially with someone who knows how to do it, to be like, let's do it better like this, I think the end result would be something so much better than I could create on my own, which is why I'm even considering this project.
No, it's interesting. I feel like I know there's some really impactful moments across the board in subgenres, and one of the most impactful moments in romance, I would argue, is in the Pride and Prejudice that they filmed with Keira Knightley and
Matthew,
whatever the hell that guy's name is.
What's his name?
It is universally referred to throughout romancedom as the hand flex.
Yeah.
And all it is, literally, he helps her into a carriage, with his hand, and then he turns around and he walks away, and as he walks away, he drops his hand to his side and he flexes it open, and I swear to God, women faint. Like, they love it. Romance readers all know about that scene. And if you can capture that kind of tension without beating them over the head with it, you're good. So you may want to watch that movie.
yeah, it's a good one. It's Matthew McFadden.
McFadden.
He's great. McFadden. Yeah, okay.
What's
thank
that?
You. Matthew McFadden. He is fantastic.
Yeah.
And what was captured in it was like the tension and the longing and the frustration and like despair and
Yeah, so I think there's more of those little moments are actually the mark of a really good tension build in a romance than the really overt things. And at the risk of pissing off my fellow romance writers, I would argue that the more novice you are, the more you use crutches like
burning loins and
like
sexy.
What's that?
Like burning loins and
where you use a false separation. So like an enemies to lovers who are really it's just a misunderstanding. They don't actually hate each other. Just he wasn't really the villain. You know what I mean? And then, but you're like, he can't touch her because he hates her, but he has a boner. That I will argue until they come for me with torches is not the best way to build tension in a romance for me. And some of this is personal taste. It is absolutely personal taste, but some of that feels false and it doesn't give you the same high as the hand flex, from Pride and Prejudice. So that's hard to explain, but once you read it and then you read somebody that's really good at building that tension, you understand.
Like you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. You little ass kisser, you.
I had to slip it in because Andy's on a delay. He might have missed the chance.
I've talked enough for one podcast, I think.
Well, I mean, goals, right? You're good. I mean, absolutely goals. You can tell what I like in a romance by the way I talk about it. And again, different strokes for different folks. Everybody loves something different. And I never forget that about romance. But when you are creating one, you do have to pay attention to what you like, right? What really keeps you invested in the story, because there will be readers like you. And I discovered that through writing, because when I first came out with Reign and Ruin, Romancy wasn't quite where it is now, even 4 years before. It just has skyrocketed in popularity. And I truly thought like nobody wanted epic fantasy with romance in it. Like truly thought that. I thought they wanted epic fantasy with the side plot. And some do. Some absolutely do. But there are more people that want the type of stuff I write than I thought. And I'm never going to hit Sarah J. Maas levels. But whatever you come out with, you'll be surprised, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So we're hitting half an hour here.
Yeah.
This seems like a lovely spot to wrap this one up.
Yeah. I think that's that one even better than I'd hoped. So a huge thank you to both Andy and Jen for coming on. And I'm sorry, Fletcher, you didn't get to talk at all.
Yeah, we didn't talk to Fletcher. I really did want to hear about the murder mystery romance.
Another time.
Yeah,
maybe episode 3.
Yeah, when he's further along in it, and he's ready to start marketing it or something, we'll have you back on and we can talk about how to pitch this thing to readers. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, we'll have to keep doing this because I enjoy it way too much.
I always come blabber about fantasy romance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Thanks for subjecting yourself to us, Andy. It was a pleasure to have you back.
Oh, it's been a delight.
I'm glad. It was perfect timing too, you having read all of Jen's stuff right before.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming by the Dripping Bucket, and we'll see you next week.